Today's recipe is from my grandmother's archives, but the origins of this one actually go way back to Penn Dutch in Western Pennsylvania and the Amish, actually. We grew up calling them Gobs. They're more traditionally known as Whoopie pies, and they're actually not pies, so the naming gets a little bit confusing. The filling for this recipe is a traditional one. You're going to see a lot of recipes out there, or store-bought Whoopie pies or Gobs, and they have a marshmallow-based cream. No, you don't want that. We're going to do a flour-based frosting that's going to be cooked on the stovetop, and it may sound a little complicated, but it's really not. So to make this, let's head over to the stovetop where we're going to combine a cup of whole milk and a 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. Whisk these together over medium-low heat, and you're just going to keep whisking and whisking until this thickens to a paste-like consistency. You can see here how it's starting to ball in the whisk, or kind of clump in the whisk a little bit. Not really clumping, but it's kind of concentrating there. This is a sign that it's done, so let's pull it off the stovetop and pour it into a heat-proof bowl. This is going to stop the cooking. All right, we are just going to set this aside and stir it occasionally. This isn't the whole frosting, but this is the base for our frosting. Very important, and I do it first, that way it can cool. By the time we're ready for it, it's ready for us. Don't forget to stir that occasionally just to keep a skin from forming on it. It's going to thicken as it sits. Now let's make the cookie shells. So you're going to need a cup of granulated sugar for the cookie bases. That's 200 grams. And I almost forgot, you want to get your oven preheating to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Super hot. I know that's what's going to help the cookies cook properly and get that nice little dome, keep them from being flat. All right, next you'll need a 1/3 cup of softened butter. It's like 5 1/3 tablespoons there. We're going to cream together the butter and the sugar until it is light and creamy. And of course, if you wanted to do this in your stand mixer, you absolutely could just use the paddle attachment, but I'm just using my electric hand mixer. Now I am using butter, but my grandmother made this using shortening, which was just like Crisco. So if you want to make it truly the old-fashioned way, use shortening. I prefer butter. It gives it a better flavor. Okay, now we have a higher ratio of sugar to butter here, so it's not going to get super like well creamed or anything, but you can see it's nicely combined, no lumps of butter remaining. Next, we're going to add 1 large egg, room temperature preferred. We're also going to add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. There's my teaspoon. Sometimes I go a little heavy on that. Stir everything together again. You can see it's nice and uniform. And then, I don't know why I'm getting rid of my mixer. We're going to add some buttermilk. You want to use, I have a buttermilk substitute, but real full-fat buttermilk works best for this recipe. It's gonna give you the best texture, flavor, moisture. This is a 1/2 cup of buttermilk. We're going to gradually stir this in. I just start my mixer on low speed and then gradually stir that in. And I do pull my buttermilk out of the fridge before I begin, so it has some time to come towards room temperature as well. Okay, this looks really good, but we're going to, as always, give everything a scrape with our spatula. You want to scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl just to make sure everything's nicely incorporated, and it seems that it is. All right, slide that out of the way, and you need a separate mixing bowl for your dry ingredients. We start with, I have no idea why this is not what you need. You need 2 cups of all-purpose flour. This is 250 grams. We're also going to add a 1/2 cup, I think that's 50 grams, of natural cocoa powder. Then a teaspoon of baking soda, 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, and a 1/2 teaspoon of table salt. All right, let's stir everything together. Get that nicely combined. All right, let's bring back our wet ingredients, and we're going to stir the wet, or the dry into the wet. You can use your electric mixer for this step if you want. We're just going to add it in like 3 parts. Your mixer on low speed. You don't want to overmix. A fun fact about this recipe, 2 states lay claim to it. Both Maine and Pennsylvania claim to be the state of its origin. As a former Pennsylvanian, you can guess which state I side with, but this is something that's evidently hotly contested. It's definitely the Pennsylvanians. It's just easier to do with an electric mixer. Next ingredient, 1/2 cup of really hot water, like boiling or steaming water. Go ahead and pour this out. I have no idea what I'm pouring here. Always check what eye level. All right, and pop quiz. Why is super hot or boiling water important? Waiting. Nobody's answering me. The answer is because we are blooming our cocoa powder. This is going to give us a really, really rich chocolate flavor. I've used this technique in a couple of recipes, like especially my chocolate cake. The difference it makes is huge. Way more flavor from using boiling water. So just keep your mixer on low, and you want everything to be uniform and silky smooth. So make sure you scrape the sides and bottom of your bowl again too, once all of that water is incorporated, and then give it another quick stir. Pause real quickly, scrape that. We'll have no batter or flour hiding in the bottom here. Okay, we're looking good. All right, one more quick stir. All right, once we're nice and truly uniform, everything's well combined, let's scoop and bake our cookies. Grab a baking sheet, line it with parchment paper, and we're going to be scooping a tablespoon of batter per cookie. I'm using my favorite handy little 1 tablespoon size scoop. Try to remember to link to this in the description, but we're going to do level tablespoons. You might be tempted to do a little bit more, but these are going to spread some in the oven, so just stick with a tablespoon. Make sure you're spacing them at least 2 inches apart and try to keep them as round as possible when you're dropping them. That will just make them look a little bit better when they come out of the oven, but honestly, let's be real, no matter how they're shaped, they're going to taste amazing. Check your oven, make sure it's truly at 450 degrees Fahrenheit, because remember, ovens lie sometimes and don't run true to temperature. It needs to actually be 450, you need that hot temperature. We're going to drop these in the center rack of the oven, bake them for 5 to 6 minutes. If the centers look a tad bit underdone, that's fine. You can always use the toothpick test to tell that they're completely finished baking. All right, important note, you do not want to overbake these cookies or they're going to be dry. You want them to be nice and moist and melt in your mouth. And if they're not, they probably just baked a little too long. If you're worried they may have cooked a little bit too long, move them over to a cooling rack pretty quickly. That way they don't overbake on the baking sheet. These look pretty good. Should come off the baking sheet nice and easily. Parchment paper really makes things easier. These will cool pretty quickly, so as long as our roux from earlier is completely cooled to room temperature, it might seem a little gloopy, that's normal, we can start making our frostings. You're going to need a cup of softened unsalted butter. And before we start adding our roux, we're going to use our electric mixer or your stand mixer to beat everything together until it's smooth and creamy. This is just going to help the roux combine a little better. Once this is smooth and lump-free, we're going to start adding our roux, which is gonna be pretty pasty seeming. Just take like a nice big spoonful. Isn't that beautiful? I'm just gonna drop it in. 1 spoonful at a time. I don't know, this is like what? 1.5 tablespoons, maybe 2 tablespoons. And we'll stir this in. And once that's incorporated, we'll do another spoonful. This paste gets pretty thick as it sits. That's pretty normal. Now, it is really important and helpful that your butter and your roux be the same temperature, and neither one should be too warm. That's really important. Otherwise, the frosting could split. Such an interesting frosting. It's like ermine, basically is ermine. There's just a few little differences. All right, before we add the sugar, because keep in mind, we have not yet added any sugar to this frosting. There's really not that much in it. We're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla extract for flavor. And we are going to add like a slightly rounded 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now, if you used salted butter for this recipe instead of unsalted, you would skip the salt. Stir these in. For the sugar, we're just using 1 cup or 125 grams of powdered sugar. We'll stir that in. Stir in that sugar until it's well combined. Frosting should be light and creamy. Let's scrape the sides of the bowl. It's a very creamy and soft filling, and it's not a marshmallow filling. That's very important. It's not nearly as sweet as a marshmallow filling, and that works really well for Gobs whoopie pies. Pair off your cookies, so in case you didn't scoop them exactly, you've got even size with even size. And if you want to pipe the frosting, you can. I usually just dollop it right on there and then top it with another cookie. Ta-da! That is how you make whoopie pies, or as I call them, Gobs. If you want any more vintage old-fashioned recipes, let me know what you'd like to see next. Wow, just like I remember them.